Thank you for tuning in to VNA News Bulletin, and here come the headlines.
The 13th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Environment opens in Hanoi. Vietnamese and Cambodian border provinces seek ways to step up cooperation. Flow of foreign direct investment into Vietnam reaches $19.2 billion.
The 13th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Environment and Related Meetings commenced in Hanoi on October 28th. Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng delivered a speech at the opening ceremony.
The 13th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Environment is scheduled to review the realization of regional environment-related agreements since the last event. It will also discuss new scopes of environmental cooperation and propose solutions to foster ASEAN collaboration in environmental matters, especially for the post-2015 period after the ASEAN community is formed. At the opening ceremony, Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng said, joining global efforts, ASEAN member nations have continually attached importance to environmental protection, biodiversity preservation, and sustainable use and management of natural resources, serving socio-economic development targets.
ASEAN tích cực tham gia Công ước khung.
ASEAN has reaped outcomes in environmental protection cooperation, including completing the implementation of actions to ensure environmental sustainability under the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint 2009 to 2015. Having stated that Vietnam is facing enormous environmental-related challenges despite endeavors and initial attainments, he called on the ASEAN countries and international community to further cooperation with and support to Vietnam in this issue.
The 8th Conference on Cooperation and Development of Vietnamese and Cambodian border provinces took place in Ho Chi Minh City on October 28th. Deputy Prime Minister Phạm Bình Minh and his Cambodian counterpart, Samdech Krolahom Sakeng, co-chaired the event.
Addressing the conference, Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister Phạm Bình Minh stressed that the event serves as the platform for ministries, agencies and localities from the two nations to discuss measures to build a stabilized and developed area along the shared border. Sharing Ming's view, Cambodian Deputy Prime Minister Sakeng agreed to join hands with Vietnam to intensify management and develop a borderline of peace, friendship, cooperation and sustainable development, thus contributing efficiently to the establishment of the ASEAN community late this year. Two-way trade hit $2.3 billion in the first 8 months of 2015, up 4% against the same period last year. To date, Vietnam has invested in 172 projects in Cambodia, with total capital of $3.61 billion, ranking second among 67 nations and territories investing in the country. The two sides reached consensus on measures to further cooperation between border provinces, striving to raise bilateral trade turnover to $5 billion in the years to come.
Ambassador Nguyễn Phương Nga, head of the Vietnam mission to the UN, has asserted Vietnam's strong opposition to the U.S. unilateral economic, commercial and financial embargo against Cuba.
In her speech at the 17th section of the UN General Assembly in New York on October 27, Nga stated Vietnam wishes to reiterate its firm conviction that the U.S. blockade against Cuba for more than 5 decades is contrary to international law and the fundamental principles of the UN Charter, causing untold hardship for the Cuban people. Vietnam has joined other members of the UN General Assembly in calling for the immediate removal of the unjustified unilateral embargo against Cuba, she said. Meanwhile, representatives from the Group of 77 Caribbean Community member countries, Mercosur member nations, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation called on the U.S. to strictly enforce resolutions of the UN General Assembly and put an end to its illegal embargo against Cuba.
The upcoming EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement contains enormous potentials for both sides, especially in triggering a new wave of investments in the country. Ambassador Bruno Angelet, head of the EU delegation to Vietnam, made the comment at a conference in Hanoi on October 28th.
During the event themed EU-Vietnam ties as the new building blocks for a stronger partnership, Mr. Bruno noted that European investment is top quality and European investors care deeply about social responsibility. Having stressed that European investment creates more added values with smart and green projects in Vietnam, the ambassador pledged to get the trade deal on track.
The second pillar is trade and investment, and obviously my key objective with the leadership of Vietnam is to rapidly come to the final conclusion, hopefully by the beginning of December, and to ratify and implement the free trade agreement as quickly as possible.
In August this year, the two sides announced an initial agreement on the free trade agreement negotiations, and the pact is expected to be finalized at the end of this year. The trade deal is expected to boost trade between Vietnam and the EU since it will eliminate nearly all tariffs, enabling numerous made-in-Vietnam products to approach the EU market. The EU has consistently been one of the largest trade partners of Vietnam, with bilateral trade reaching $36.8 billion in 2014, up 8.8% year-on-year. On the occasion, EU representatives reiterated the bloc's continuous support to Vietnam with some 400 million euros, equivalent to $441.7 million in official development assistance between 2014 and 2020. Notably, 346 million euros, or more than 86% of the total funding, will be poured into developing a sustainable energy sector in Vietnam.
So the first dimension of our energy package is to help Vietnam's government to promote electrification in remote rural areas for the poorest people of Vietnam. The second dimension, which is very important for us as well, is to ensure that Vietnam and the leadership of Vietnam organizes, promotes the transition from a polluting power sector to a sustainable power sector, meaning from basically coal-fired production to more sustainable power and electricity production.
The government rule of law, justice and social security are other priorities where the EU will help Vietnam move forward.
Developing an orientation framework for green finance and green financial products in Vietnam's capital market in line with green growth and sustainable development was the theme of a seminar held in Hanoi on October 28th. Our reporters bring you more details.
Generally speaking, developing green finance and green financial products is part of green growth, which embraces a high quality of development and attaches importance to energy conservation and environmental protection. The seminar was designed to create a space for stakeholders to understand the green finance mechanism towards joining it voluntarily.
At first, green finance and green indices should be defined in the law for all of us to get a basic understanding. Conditions for green initial public offerings would then follow.
At the workshop, experts said it is necessary to have supporting policies, including preferential tax treatment for capital mobilization, as green investment requires larger primary capital compared to conventional options. In the near future, the State Securities Commission, with the support of relevant ministries and branches, is set to develop and carry out an orientation framework for green finance and green financial products, contributing practically to the success of the nation's green growth strategy and sustainable economic restructuring.
Foreign direct investments worth $19.2 billion poured into Vietnam through October 20th, a whopping rise of more than 40% over the same period last year. More details come up next.
The General Statistics Office reported Vietnam had 1,657 new FDI projects during the period, with a total registered capital of more than $12.4 billion, increasing by respective 27% and 25%. Of note, some $11.8 billion were disbursed, up 16.3% against a year ago. The processing and manufacturing industry remained the top destination for FDI, which attracted $12.4 billion during the period, or more than 64% of the country's total registered FDI. The property sector came third with total registered capital worth $2.1 billion. Malaysia was the top FDI investor in Vietnam from 59 countries and territories, with an investment of $2.4 billion. It was followed by the Republic of Korea, the United Kingdom, and Japan. Vietnam is expected to attract $23 billion in FDI this year. Last year, the country attracted more than $20 billion.
Japanese retail giant AEON opened its first ever shopping mall in Hanoi on October 28th, less than 2 years after the grand opening of its maiden Vietnam Trade Center in Ho Chi Minh City.
AEON Mall Long Bien is the third AEON shopping mall in Vietnam and also the largest AEON project in the country to date. AEON Mall Long Bien has 4 stories above ground, with a total leasable area of around 72,000 square meters, capable of hosting more than 180 stores. 50% of the goods available at AEON Mall Long Bien are Vietnamese made, whereas 20% come from Japan and 30% from other markets. The rate of Vietnamese goods is expected to increase to 90% in the future. The first AEON shopping mall in Vietnam was opened in January 2014 in Ho Chi Minh City, and the second was inaugurated 10 months later in the southern province of Bình Dương.
The Mekong Delta, one of the most vulnerable deltas in the world in regard to climate change, must begin to take urgent measures to deal with the continuing consequences of changing weather patterns. Experts gave the recommendation at a seminar in Cần Thơ City.
As temperatures increase, storms, floods, and landslides are occurring more regularly under the impact of global climate change. With such change, creating cities resilient to climate change is critically important. During the seminar, experts and officials discussed climate change adaptation in Cần Thơ City and other areas in the Mekong Delta. Experts said that unplanned urbanization would enhance the negative impact of climate change. Vietnam is one of 5 countries and the Mekong Delta one of the 3 deltas in the world most vulnerable to climate change. Between 2015 to 2030, floods are expected to be a major problem in Cần Thơ and the Mekong Delta. Besides landslides and clean water insufficient, the consequences of drought will affect the economy and people's health as well. About 66% of the city was now urban, and the infrastructure had been built under current living standards. However, pollution and floods have threatened the sustainable development of the city and delta.
Photos featuring the capital city of Hanoi over the past 30 years of reform are on display at an exhibition at the Temple of Literature. Let's find out more.
The photos compare Hanoi in the past and at present, showing the changes and the development of the city over 30 years of reform. 80 photos highlight different aspects of the city, including politics, economics, urban management, and socio-culture, among others. They were taken by members of the Hanoi Elderly People's Photography Club and journalists and collaborators of the Kinh tế and Đô thị newspaper.
Hanoi has seen drastic changes. The photos show the great progress Hanoi has made over the past 30 years. Hanoi is developing well in its industrialization and modernization process, while still preserving and upholding its traditional cultural values.
The annual exhibition, the 10th of its kind, will last until October 31st.
And that has wrapped up our daily bulletin. Thank you for tuning in and goodbye from Hanoi.